While peasants toiled in fields, what was life like for the other 10% of the medieval population? Today, we step into the embroidered shoes of a medieval noble to explore daily life from dawn until dusk. From early morning prayers to political meetings, hunting parties, and courtly rituals, the noble lifestyle was complex, luxurious, and full of responsibility. Let's uncover the daily routine of our medieval lords and ladies. Nobles typically woke with the sun. In wealthier households, they might be roused by a servant. The morning routine started with prayers or time in a private chapel. Personal grooming involved scented waters, combing hair, and donning layers of clothing assisted by attendants. For nobles, appearance mattered. Men dressed in tunics, hose, and embroidered surcoats. Women wore long gowns, often with elaborate headpieces. Clothing reflected status and changed with the seasons. Breakfast was light: bread, cheese, eggs, maybe a bit of cold meat, washed down with ale or spiced wine. Nobles ate breakfast privately, not at large feasts except on special occasions. The medieval noble wasn't idle. Much of the morning was spent overseeing the estate. This could include meetings with stewards, bailiffs, or reeves, each with distinct roles. The steward was the noble's chief administrative officer, overseeing the estate's financial and domestic affairs. The bailiff managed the daily operations of the manor, ensuring the fields were worked and rents were collected. The reeve, often a peasant chosen by their peers, acted as a kind of foreman or overseer, helping to organize labor and settle minor disputes among the workers. Together, these figures ensured the smooth functioning of the estate and reported directly to the lord or lady. Men handled administrative work, settling disputes, reviewing taxes, collecting rents, or writing letters. The lord might also train for combat, ride out to inspect land, or participate in local politics. Noblewomen managed the household, overseeing servants, organizing supplies, managing food stores, and sometimes educating children. Some women handled accounts, especially in their husband's absence. Noble children lived structured lives. Boys learned Latin, reading, manners, music, and hunting. Girls learned embroidery, household management, reading, and religious studies. Boys around age 7 might be sent to another noble household to serve as a page, beginning their knightly education. Girls stayed closer to home, preparing for future roles as wives and ladies of the manor. Tutors and chaplains often provided instruction. Education was mostly religious or practical. No algebra, but plenty of etiquette in scripture. The main meal of the day was eaten around midday in the Great Hall. Meals were elaborate compared to peasant fare. Dishes included roasted meats, stews, cheeses, fresh or dried fruits, and richly spiced pastries. Meat was common: beef, pork, game, poultry. Utensils were minimal, often just knives and hands. Entertainment included minstrels, jesters, and storytelling. Meals were social events, with status shown by seating order and clothing. Afternoons might be spent hunting, hawking, horseback riding, or playing chess. Hunting was not just sport, but also training for war and a show of status. Compete with trained dogs and hawks, elaborate gear, and social rituals. Jousting practice or mock battles might also be part of a young nobleman's routine. Noblewomen might sew, paint, compose music, or walk in formal gardens while accompanied by attendants. Embroidery was not only practical, but also a symbol of refinement. Some noblewomen practiced illuminated manuscript art or engaged in courtly poetry and letter writing. Board games like backgammon and chess were popular, as were storytelling sessions and musical performances with lutes or harps. Education continued for children or pages in the afternoon, sometimes including physical training like swordplay or horsemanship for boys, and music or etiquette for girls. Leisure in noble circles was as much about cultivating virtue and grace as it was about passing time. Religion was deeply woven into noble life. Many nobles had private chapels in their manors or castles. Morning and evening prayers were routine. Attending mass was expected, and nobles were major patrons of churches and monasteries. They gave tithes, donated land, and sponsored chapels for spiritual favor. Confession, fasting, and feast days were part of the spiritual rhythm. Religious holidays brought celebrations, feasts, and public charity. Pilgrimages were also undertaken, some for penance, others for prestige. Men managed land, fought in wars, held political office, and swore fealty to lords or kings. They trained for battle and engaged in diplomacy. Women ran the household, raised children, and maintained the family's honor and social presence. Some noblewomen acted as regents or estate managers while husbands were away. Marriage was a strategic alliance between noble houses. Unions were arranged young, often in their early teens. A dowry was negotiated, and permission from both families and often a lord was required. Love was secondary to power and land. Still, some couples formed close bonds. While romantic affection wasn't the foundation of marriage, companionship and mutual respect, and even love sometimes grew over time. Once married, young couples typically lived with or near the husband's family estate. The bride would assume household responsibilities, and the groom would begin formal training in estate management, warfare, or court life. Families tended to be large, though child mortality was high. Children were raised by nurses and tutors, not entirely by their parents. Inheritance laws favored male heirs, though daughters could inherit in some regions, especially if there were no surviving sons. Noble income came from land, rents from peasants, crops, and taxes. Some held legal rights over mills, markets, or forests. They also received gifts, dowries, and war spoils. Nobles had little need to work directly, but had to manage resources efficiently. Large households required funds for servants, maintenance, clothing, and constant entertaining. Some nobles grew wealthy, others fell into debt. Status had to be maintained, even if it meant borrowing money. It was all about keeping up appearances. Evenings were quieter, offering nobles a chance to unwind after a structured day. Activities included private prayer in a chapel or bedroom, followed by music, storytelling, or reading aloud by candlelight, often performed by a literate member of the household or a visiting cleric. Supper was a simpler meal than the midday feast, usually consisting of cold meats, bread, cheese, or pottage. It was typically eaten in a more intimate setting than the Great Hall, sometimes in a private solar or parlor. After supper, some nobles enjoyed games such as chess or dice, or listened to minstrels recount tales of chivalry and heroism. Noblewomen might use this time for embroidery or quiet conversation. As the day drew to a close, lords and ladies often reflected on spiritual matters, sometimes guided by a chaplain. Candles or oil lamps provided the only light, and bedtime came early by modern standards, in part due to the natural rhythm of sunrise and sunset. The noble day was structured, ritualistic, and full of expectation. It was a life of luxury, but also duty. Next time you imagine medieval life, remember, the nobility weren't idle elites. They worked hard to keep wealth, power, and appearances intact. If you enjoyed this deep dive, tell me in the comments what aspect of medieval life you'd like to explore next.